Hello and welcome to this short video in which I will identify the HazMat employee and explain HazMat employee training, as that training is required by the U.S. Department of Transportation and PHMSA. It is the responsibility of the HazMat employer to ensure their HazMat employees, all of them, are trained and tested to comply with the hazardous materials regulations. Before we can dig right into the nitty-gritty, we're going to back up a little bit and explain just a little bit more. We must first understand just what is the U.S. Department of Transportation. Well, this is a federal level agency, been around since 1967, and they are responsible for the regulation of all domestic transportation. This includes people, property, hazardous materials, non-hazardous materials, by all modes, by highway, by rail, by air, by vessel. Now, to do all this, this one agency is broken down into 13 different administrations and bureaus. And while you have heard of the U.S. Department of Transportation, you may not have heard of one of its administrations. And that is this one, PHMSA, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. PHMSA regulates everything that moves by pipeline in the U.S. That's the P in PHMSA. That's not really what we're going to be discussing here today. PHMSA also regulates the domestic transportation of hazardous materials in commerce. And it does this by all modes. So by motor vehicle, rail car, vessel, and aircraft. Just what is a hazardous material? Well, it is defined by PHMSA as a chemical substance like a paint, a solvent, a resin, a compressed gas, or a manufactured article, a battery, an engine, a compressor, a vehicle that is transported in commerce. More on that in a little bit. And is capable of posing an unreasonable risk to health, safety, and property. So now we have to take a closer look at what is considered to be capable of posing this unreasonable risk. A hazardous material is defined as being one of the following. So in addition to the previous, it also must be identified by name in the hazardous materials table, or it may match the definition of a hazard class or division. It may be a hazardous substance, a hazardous waste, a marine pollutant, or an elevated temperature material. If it's any one of those and meets the characteristics of the previous slide, then you would have a hazardous material. What then is the HazMat employer? Well, this is also defined in the regulations. A HazMat employer includes the employer of a HazMat employee. It includes self-employed persons who transport HazMat, and it includes a government agency. Now, it's one of these three, and they transport HazMat in commerce. They cause HazMat to be transported in commerce. That one earns a star because that's one I think a lot of people aren't aware of. If you cause a hazardous material to be transported in commerce, you order it and have it delivered to your facility, you are a HazMat employer. So you don't have to actually operate a vehicle or arrange for off-site transportation, merely causing it to be transported in commerce. Receiving at your facility or being shipped from your facility makes you a HazMat employer. And the term includes anyone who designs, manufactures, or tests a HazMat packaging as part of their business. This has come up a couple times. It's important enough to define this. What's meant by in commerce? Well, the regulations say in commerce means it is trade or transport within a single state, between two or more states, or it affects the trade or transport between two or more states. Also includes transport on a U.S. registered aircraft. Basically, if the transportation is by or for a business, it will be considered to be in commerce. So even a government agency, if it arranges for off-site transportation through a third party, a commercial party, then that would be considered to be in commerce. We have a definition of a hazardous material. We have a definition of a HazMat employer. What then is a HazMat employee? Well, they work for a HazMat employer, full-time, part-time, or even just temporary. Or they're self-employed and transport hazmat, and in the course of employment directly affects hazardous materials transportation safety. That's a direct quote right from the regulation. So what does directly affects mean? Well, that's kind of vague, right? But if your job function has a direct effect on the safe transportation of a hazardous material, you would be a HazMat employee. It also includes railroad signalman and a railroad maintenance of way employee. The term HazMat employee specifically includes any of the following functions. So a person who loads, unloads, or handles hazmat in transportation, designs, manufactures, or tests a hazmat packaging, prepares a hazmat for transportation. This could be many functions that take place well away from the hazardous material itself. This could be classifying a hazardous material, reviewing, preparing, or signing the shipping papers. Many office functions where people never even handle the hazardous material could be involved in this definition of prepare the hazmat for transportation. Operate a vehicle transporting a hazardous material. This could be a motor vehicle by highway, or a vessel over water, or an aircraft. For some reason, railroad engineers get a break. And then there's this. The regulated function of a HazMat employee includes persons who are responsible for the safety of hazmat transportation. A term like that, again, reaches into the front office. This could be the direct supervisor of HazMat employees, a person who themselves never performs a regulated function around a hazardous material, but they directly supervise people who do. That would make them a HazMat employee as well. So just what does a HazMat employee do? Well, there are a lot of job functions. Loading and unloading hazardous materials, and that includes from a tanker truck, working on the shipping and receiving dock, supervising people who do, packaging hazardous materials, operating a motor vehicle, reviewing, signing, or preparing hazardous materials shipping papers. Those and a lot of other functions are the regulated functions of a HazMat employee. Do you have HazMat employees at your facility? You probably do. More than one? Yeah, you probably do. What training then is required? If you do have HazMat employees, they must be trained within 90 days of new employment or a changed job function, which would then make them subject to the regulations. And during that 90 days, or however long it is, they must be under the direct supervision of trained and knowledgeable HazMat employees. So while you're waiting that 90 days for them to get their training, it's not enough to just send them out on the shop floor and figure they'll be okay. They must be under the direct supervision of trained and knowledgeable HazMat employees until they receive their training. And this is a triennial training requirement, so recurrent training must be provided at least once within 3 years. What is the content of HazMat employee training? Well, it must include general awareness and familiarization. So the HazMat employee knows how to identify a hazardous material and knows the basics of hazard communication and packaging. And even if it's not part of their job function, you still must include general awareness and familiarization. Then you have to dig in. The training must include a component on function-specific responsibilities of the HazMat employee. Training must include a component on safety and emergency response and a component on security general awareness. In-depth security training is only required for certain HazMat employees at certain HazMat employers. So that is provided only if applicable. And driver training would only be provided if applicable as another component to your HazMat employee training. And one more thing, your HazMat employee training must include a test. Now, you might be thinking we've already been through safety training, we've already been through security training. Well, PHMSA does offer you a break here. Training that has been conducted to comply with other regulations may satisfy the safety and the security training requirements of PHMSA. So perhaps you've already done training under the US EPA or OSHA or some other regulatory body, or for whatever reason you may provide training, you can at least get a break on the safety training and the security training of PHMSA. But the other required components would remain. And not everyone requires all of the training. A person who solely repairs, modifies, reconditions, or tests the HazMat packagings and nothing else, they don't need the safety and emergency response training. Railroad maintenance of way employee, if that's all that they do, they don't require function-specific training or security awareness or in-depth security. But the general awareness, familiarization, and the safety and emergency response would still remain for them. And of course, we must keep records. So the HazMat employer must maintain a record of the training for each HazMat employee that was provided within the last 3 years for the length of that HazMat employee's employment, and for 90 days beyond their final date of employment. After that, then you may purge those records. These records must be made available upon request. It's interesting to note that the #1 leading cause of HazMat violations is improper training records. The #2 leading cause is no training records at all. This concludes this brief overview of the HazMat employee training requirements. If you have any questions, please contact me. Thank you very much.